Good evening. Welcome to the RSU 5 board meeting. It is February 6, 2019. We're in the Freeport High School. We are missing Jeremy and Maddie. They both let us know they wouldn't be able to join us this evening, but otherwise all of our board members are here, and we're hoping we'll have a student rep. Rhea is supposed to join us tonight, so hopefully she'll join us, and we'll get started with the Pledge of Allegiance, which Kate was already standing ready for. Okay, so I would take a motion for consideration and approval of the minutes from the January 23rd, 2019 meeting as presented, barring any errors or omissions. Jen, Mara, all those in favor? None opposed, thank you. Adjustments to the agenda? None. Next is supposed to be our report from the student rep, but we might slide that a little bit later in the agenda if she's able to join us. Oh! That is an entrance. That's okay. Take a second. I'm going to open up public comment and we'll come back to yours just so you can get yourself settled. Although I don't see anybody for public comment either. Could someone give Ray a second and come and speak?
Oh, I could share that the basketball game, the varsity basketball game, was that last night? It was awesome. And as we were saying the Pledge of Allegiance, I was recalling the phenomenal, what do you call that? The singing thing? Anthem, national anthem. Before it was stunning.
Who did it?
I can't remember their names.
Was it a student?
Two students, and they sang it in harmony together, and it was just, I mean, it was like Super Bowl worthy, in my opinion. It was so good.
Oh, very cool.
I wanted to see Jen Galko. Hi, good evening. If I could give an update, because I don't think Rhea will do this. Oh, you are going to do it. Oh, good. Do you want to do it? Go ahead. So we had two students awarded today as recipients of the 2019 Scholastic Art and Writing Awards, and one of them was Coralie Green, who got the Silver Key for a science fiction short story, and the other was Rhea Fitzpatrick, who got a Silver Key in poetry. I did not think she would update you on that.
She's like, well, I toot my own horn here for a second. Well, congratulations. Very exciting. Carry on.
So, as usual, great things are happening at Freeport High School. We're all having a lot of fun. It's Spirit Week, so everyone's wearing their clothes, and it's very, there's a lot of school spirit, which is good to see. And everyone's looking forward to the Snowball semi-formal this Saturday, and tickets are $8, if you forgot. And the guidance department is hosting an informational meeting on the college admissions process here on February 12th at 6 p.m. And then I had the Silver Key thing, just like two students won Silver Key for the Scholastic Writing Awards. So yeah, I wasn't going to say who it was. And anyway, that's all I have for this evening. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Congratulations. Wow, we've got a lot of NAs on our agenda. Reports from the superintendent, NA, administrator, NA, board comments, and committee reports, NA. So we'll move on to policy. Consideration and approval for the following policy, second read. This is the educational mission and vision.
So I know last time I talked about we really didn't want to make any revisions, but believe it or not, we took the feedback that we received here at the board meeting, and the next day we looked at it and we did make a couple of tweaks based upon the feedback that Mara provided us so that it wouldn't read so kind of redundant. So you can see that under our students that compassionate was changed to empathetic. And I think we might have a misspelling there.
It is the word. It can be either. because I checked in the
Oh, you
dictionary
did?
saying, is this a word? And
Yeah.
it is a word, and it means
Yeah.
exactly the same as empathetic.
Okay, well, I think we want to do
Change it to
the
the
traditional
yeah.
empathetic
That's,
spelling.
that's probably the noun, right? Empathic is like,
Yeah,
no, that's really not the noun.
yeah.
Right, that's what I'm thinking about.
It's an adjective too.
Is it?
But empathetic is probably better.
Yeah, I
It's
think
kind of
so.
like psychic when it's empathic, like
exactly
like
what
you
I'm
have like a special superpower or something.
Okay,
Students will all have when they graduate.
okay, this is getting way more complicated than I thought it was going to be. And then in the very kind of last sentence, we took out responsible and just left it as students graduate as compassionate, honest, and respectful citizens who learn and contribute to their communities for life. So just those two minor tweaks.
Okay. I would take a motion for approval of the policy for a second read. Valley, Kate, any further discussion? All those in favor? None opposed, thank you. Okay, so on to unfinished business, budget.
Okay, so I received a couple of questions about wanting to hear about the process that we use, so I'm going to kind of walk us through that and a couple of other budget updates that I have, and then we'll go to the review of the different building sites. So we started our budget process back on November the 6th at the administrative team meeting. And at that meeting, we really looked at the board goals and talked about that as we start putting in requests, we want to really think about what will help us get further in moving student achievement forward. We looked at some district data. We reviewed the budget forms that we were going to be using. We always look at enrollment. And then I always provide the administrators with their timelines for their individual meetings. And then the rest of that November 6th meeting was really spent as a brainstorming session where administrators could really ask each other about anything that they were thinking about. And so we had questions like, could you tell me more about the Endeavor program at the high school? Because, you know, it might be an elementary principal that wasn't as familiar with it. How successful has the RTIB EdTech been at Durham Community School? The administrators really wanted to understand the district needs and to really gather information from one another and just flesh out any ideas that they were thinking about. So that's what we did at that meeting, with the understanding that everyone would leave that meeting, think about it, and then at the November 13th meeting, which was our next meeting, to bring their requests to the administrative team. So at November 13th, we kind of started the meeting with just asking individual administrators to talk about their request, and then if people had clarifying questions for them, they could ask at that time, and those requests were all charted and recorded. At that meeting, there were some requests that came out that Valley, I think it was you that asked, you sent me a question about, are these all of the requests? Does everybody still have their sheet from the last meeting that, because I'm going to be referencing that, about the administrative.
Purple last time.
And if you don't, I think Michelle has copies. If you raise your hand, she'll just bring you a copy, because you might have taken it out when you got home and then it's not in there. Okay. All right, because this is going to help you follow my train of thinking. So the question really was, were these all of the requests? So these are not all of the requests, because at the November 13th meeting, there were requests that were put on the chart paper that after we finished that meeting, I said, I think I'll be reaching out and meeting with some individual administrators about some of their requests and seeing if we can talk about it and deal with it in a different way than through the budget process. So for example, it was at that meeting that Craig asked for $11,000 for the electrical work for the snack shack. And so we got together after that meeting and talked about how we really want the electrical to the snack shack for the spring sports. And so we talked about that. We looked at the budget with Michelle. We kind of met with the finance committee around that, and we've decided to fund that this year. So you're not seeing that on this sheet. Another item that we talked about at that meeting was Michelle Lichtai, our finance director, had requested additional time in the human resource department. And through that meeting, Emily Grimm said, you know, we might have some time over at Mass Landing that we could help you out with specific projects. And then in meeting with Peter, with the community programs, we have Sarah Cass in the receptionist role, and we brainstormed ways we could reallocate. And, you know, Michelle was happy with that solution, so you're not seeing that on this piece of paper. So those kind of things were worked out between the November 13th meeting and the December 18th meeting. And then at the December 18th meeting, we really finalized the request. I kind of brought a sheet, we looked at it, and anything you see under the first priority, I kind of presented to the administrative team as I think these are things that we all feel that are essential. And so we kind of put that under the first priority. And we felt like they were essential because we have a class size policy now. We have specific programming needs for our students with disabilities. And the Van Ed Tech that you see on there, that's in priority 1 because we feel like it's a safety concern. So those were all put in the first priority. We talked about that. We all agreed to that. And so everything that you see from the second priority down, those were kind of listed on a chart. And then the administrators were able to ask more clarifying questions about different things. And then at the end of all the questions, they voted on the things they felt like should be the highest priority. And so that's really kind of what happened at the December 18th meeting. So when we left that meeting, I kind of had all of those things, and I went back and worked with Michelle about, well, what happens if we put in the nursing, and I felt comfortable putting into the superintendent's recommended budget anything that was in that second priority, and looking at the expenditure increase and the tax impact that it would have. And then all the items you see in the third priority that we really felt like those were important too, but that those are probably things that you'll see in another year. And then the thing that you see under the other request, even though that was initially asked for, when everyone saw the other competing needs, that one really did not receive any votes. So that's why you see it under other requests. And we talked about how this is for the sound systems that we've been putting in here. I think every year we've been putting in a few since I've been here. I think it started with the building at Durham Community School, where some of those classrooms that was put in when it was built, and then we've just expanded from there. So in another year, we'll be able to finish that. That's just kind of been a rolling project. Then at that January 15th, I also just reviewed the PowerPoint presentation, received some feedback around that, and then you guys saw that presentation on January 23rd. So it pretty much is the same process that we used last year that we felt like ended up working really well with the administrative team. At the end of that meeting, it did receive unanimous support from the whole administrative team. So that was the process that we used this year. other budget updates that I just want to make you aware of. We budgeted 8% for our prediction around the property and casualty. Since our last board meeting, we received a communication from MSMA predicting that it's going to be closer to 12 to even maybe 15%, even though they don't have any hard numbers, so we're going to have to add that into the budget. And we also failed to put into that initial budget the mentor stipends, and you've heard a little bit about that's the new statute that we're required to, starting next year, provide mentors for new teachers. So that's going to be another $36,000 that we need to add into the budget. We did not run those numbers to see what the new impact would be, because I also received a communication from the DOE that they're expecting that we'll know what our subsidy is by February 15th. And so we're just waiting to include all of those new numbers until we get our subsidy, and then I'll provide you with an update on that. And we still do not know anything about the Region 10 budget. So we currently have 5% in that line. So that concludes my update.
Thank you. Yeah.
Quick follow-up question. Thank you so much. That was a great explanation. So the only thing I would like to know is, was every request that's not included here worked out somehow? You gave 2 examples, and I
Yes.
assume that they were, based
Yes.
on what you said? Okay,
They
great.
were.
And the other question is, when the administrators were voting, was there a limited number of votes that they each had? or how did
Yes,
that work?
yes, because otherwise, yes, that they each had 6 votes.
Great.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And then the other piece of the process that I think we were going to chat about is as we're going through the budget process and we're getting the worksheets for each of the presentations before the board meeting, if you have specific questions related to those presentations or those administrators, if you could send them ahead of time, we'll make sure that the administrators get a heads up about the question so that they can come prepared for the answers. Typically, our packages go out on Thursday, sometimes Friday if Ginny is swamped. Yeah, it's probably more likely people getting her stuff later than her being swamped. But I'm not looking at you, Will. I mean, you just happen to be right in front of me. So typically we get them on Thursday, if not Friday latest. So if we could have those questions, ideally end of day Monday, to give Becky and the administrative team time to find the answers for us, because I think that'll get us the best results on those questions when they have a little time to pull it together if they need to. Is that it? I think so.
It is.
All right. Okay, so we are going to move to our first budget presentation, and it will be Will Pidden for Durham Community School.
Good evening. So it is helpful to get the questions ahead of time, but now I'm kind of a little confused. I don't know whether to start with the answers to the questions or the half-empty presentation that will then be followed by questions. But what I think I'm going to do is there was a couple of questions on our sheet. I believe everybody has a copy of these, right? If I speak to that. To just sort of summarize the impact of last year's budget additions, and then I'll segue from that into this year's, because that would address a couple of the questions that came up first. So last year, there's actually a piece missing in that box, which I'm sure Ginny will point out to me tomorrow as to somehow I missed that. But there's another component in that box, so the one I'm looking at. So we had staffing adjustments for this year, 5 hours of ed tech time. That was half an hour a day for 2 of our staff members. Those roles are in the literacy and math intervention support, and what it has allowed us to do is really sort of maximize the whole day. So previously, those staff members would finish at 3 o'clock and in essence have to clock out at 3 o'clock. But the school day doesn't finish until 3:15. And likewise in the morning times, it's helped us to really maximize our time with students, and also to have those staff members then in their supporting role check back in with their supervising teachers around wrapping up for the day or prepping for the day. So those times have been very helpful for those two support staff. We had also changed those same roles from EdTech 2s to EdTech 3s. Just a reminder on that, an EdTech 3 at that role allows that individual to plan as well as deliver some material, which this is the same roles for the RTI work, which again makes it very helpful because it maximizes the benefit of a supervising teacher with their supporting ed tech, that they can build the skill set of that supporting ed tech, and makes them more responsive by being able to sort of plan accordingly. They're still under the supervision of the teacher, but they can plan by seeing and experiencing what the children need. The piece that's missing on there is we'd added 0.5 literacy support for grades 5 through 8. That had been one of the questions, sort of an update on how that's going. That has been going very well. It was always a glitch for us. We had support K through 4. And as much as we would like to think that, all right, after instruction for K through 4 or pre-K through 4, and then support for those who aren't making it, they should be all sorted out by the end of 4th grade. The reality is for some learners it is a different time frame. And also with children moving in, perhaps who came from different situations, we had this need that wasn't filled in grades 5 through 8. So we were very fortunate to be able to hire an experienced teacher for this role, even though it's half-time. And she worked with students throughout the grade levels of 5 through 8, collaborating with the teachers there to identify through assessment data. And students are making good gains really in 2 measures. So one is around Fountas Pinnell levels, which are the reading assessment we use to sort of gauge progress. And then the other piece, which is so kind of critical at this age range, is that content starts to have more complex vocabulary. And for a struggling reader, there's obviously different components to it, whether it be the pace or understanding or comprehension, but being able to access some of the academic vocabulary within their subject areas is also a barrier. So another measure we look for is involvement and engagement in their classes, because they're able to access that material more readily or participate more readily. So we're seeing benefits in both those measures. We're seeing kids move along with their reading assessment, but we're also seeing students being successful in their classrooms from being able to access some of that material. So like anything, you know, the students who we maximize that with make the quickest gains, and for those who we group up and see a little less frequently, slightly slower. But we're half a year into this, and we have great supporting data for them. All the students have individual goals and plans, and their progress monitored, and that information is shared with the teacher. So it's not just go do this and then it's not relevant to what's going on. The teachers then know these are the skills we're working on with this child, and this is the particular piece we need you to focus on as well in the classroom. So balancing that tier 2 and tier 1. So that's been very beneficial. Thank you. The point 3 music, we had added that to support the band and chorus. We've been trying to grow both those activities, and we had sort of reached a point where we could no longer provide the time necessary for lessons, because our teacher also provides pre-K through 8 general music classes. So by adding that point 3, that has now lifted us. We were at 1.2, so we're now at 1.5. That has allowed us to add more specific lessons for students with band. And we, from last year to this, even though our numbers are still relatively small, but the advanced band's grown 30% and the chorus has grown 30% from last year. So chorus alone went from 31 children to 42 children. What's sort of a nice problem to have is that they no longer fit for chorus practice in the music room, because the music room's kind of small. So they actually practice up on the stage, because we have the walls that kind of will come across. So you have an interesting sort of accompaniment of gym on one side, chorus in the middle, and then morning breakfast on the other side. And so I will tell you that the middle is the place to be. So, but in both settings, and the children did a great job at their winter concert, and we're excited to see how they do with their spring concert. So I'd thank you for those supports you provided for us this year. They're all being put to good use, and I think having direct impact on student learning and also then students of enrichment and participation in music, which is really, as we talked about last year, and in fact that was one that you all had brought forward at a later point in the process, because whilst we felt it would be valuable, it wasn't sort of a priority given other needs. But it's been nice to have that, and the music program has a stronger history in Freeport Middle Schools and certainly at the high school, and so having our students have the confidence and skill set to come in and then participate once they get here and join everyone else is great. So then for this school year, for next school year, the upcoming budget 2020, there's a couple of pieces we're requesting. I'm going to come to the class teacher last because that takes some explaining, and I'd rather just knock through the clean stuff first, and then I'll try and explain the other pieces clearly as I can. If you start at the very back, where it says other significant FY20 requests, we have staff developers come from Teachers College, as you know, each year to work with our teachers. There's a K2 staff developer and a 3-5 staff developer, grades 3-5 and grades K2. And during the staff developers visit in the fall, going through our elementary classrooms for us and looking at classroom libraries and student reading boxes, felt that we needed to try and accelerate some of the newer books into our classroom libraries. We were looking at why. I mean, it is book money is an item that is well supported in our district and has been for several years. One of the shifts that has occurred, as we've had quite a number over the last few years, we've had quite a number of retirements or people moving, and newer teachers coming in. So if you look at a teacher's classroom library, and you might see shelves of books, at least half of them the teacher has bought. And so it can give a false sense of security. So when that teacher then actually moves, we leave all the school ones that were purchased, but all of a sudden there's not quite the range. So I think that's been a bit of an impact for us over the last few years. So we are requesting an amount of book money that goes beyond our regular allowance, and that is what that figure there is for. It'd be for elementary classroom libraries, really around a couple of particular grade levels. Then the other piece we're asking for is to add 3 days to administrative assistant work for their work year. At the moment, it works out that for our administrative assistant, it's about 20 additional days to the school year. I don't have the number exactly right, but this actually goes in line with the books. So when we get books in, what we do is we stamp them with, the school stamp in terms of identifying them for a school piece. And for books that need to be leveled, we level them. So through our sort of A through Z range from the Fountas and Pinnell. As easy as that sounds, it's amazing how time-consuming it is. And there's many volunteers who say, I'd love to come and volunteer. When they get to the boxes of books, they're like, is there anything I can do with children, maybe? We're like, yes, you can help them read by stamping our books. So in effort to make sure that the books are on the shelves and ready to go at the beginning of the school year and not kind of coming out piecemeal, and it's just not these pieces, it's also around all the materials coming in. To have the materials ready to go right from the beginning, our administrative assistant identified that she felt 3 additional days would allow her to get that done so that we're ready to start day one with children. So that's what that piece is for. Any questions thus far? Yes.
The image of teachers purchasing so many books with their own money sort of begs the question, is the book budget is the general book budget enough? Like, so this doesn't, continue to happen over the years?
It's that's a hard question to answer because there's something about teachers and buying books.
If we gave them a huge budget, they'd
Yeah.
still do it.
It's,
Oh, yeah, so, yeah, okay.
that it's so in theory, Lindsay, I think logically, what you're suggesting makes perfect sense. But in reality, it still happens. It's sort of like when we add money to the supply budget because teachers are spending money on supplies. Or it's not to dismiss the generosity of the teachers. They work very hard and they want to provide something. But I do think that for the most part, we've not had to do this as a sort of annual aspect. This is actually sort of a one-off scenario. So I don't think so is my answer. I think that the book budget is really quite adequate. I think we've just hit a bit of a tsunami of turnover at one time. I don't think we should have a classroom be dependent on a teacher bringing in their own materials. So I want to be clear on that. But I do think that what we'll often see is more experienced teachers saying, hey, no problem, here, you can borrow these. Or if a teacher has switched grade level, gone from, say, first grade to fourth grade, they'll often say, I'm just going to leave these books for first grade. And the teacher, some teachers who retire might be like, I'm going to just leave these books for the school if you'd like them. So a lot of that happens. So it's just that the circumstance has been this time. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. So then classroom numbers and...
Can I ask you a quick question before you
sorry.
move on? Just
Yeah.
the 3 days of the admin in the summer.
Yeah.
I apologize. I don't have a good grasp. I always feel like we see these admin summer times, and I know it's been spread over different schools for different things.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's registering for classes. Sometimes it's this. What are our typical? When do they come back from the summer?
So it used to be that I can't speak for all the schools. I can speak for our school. So what it used to be for us was that the administrative support would work 10 days after the school year and 10 days prior to the school year. That was sort of the additional 20 days. But in the past, Durham would start prior to Labor Day, and so there were 10 days after the school year before 4th of July. These days, it doesn't quite work that way. So they'll work a bit of time after the school year, and usually until the end of June, and then it rolls into the next school budget year. And so, but they will restart in the school year 10 days before school starts. But during the summer, for our school, it will be much more around things like, obviously there's quite a bit of ordering and then processing of orders. There will be, there are new student registrations, but not so many. I mean, that tends to, a lot of other schools aren't open, so sometimes mailings and things like that come later on. Parents will come in for registration, so we can track it. But getting the packets sometimes doesn't happen immediately. There'll be reviewing and rewriting student handbooks or parent handbooks, or the things that sort of happen in that format. So that when the piece prior to school, 2 weeks prior to school, then there's quite a lot, because then it sort of ramps right up in terms of teacher first day materials, parent, family packets of materials to take home, edits to handbooks, sorting materials for teachers, things like that. So in the summertime, they'll perhaps come in once a week to do, either orders or process orders, or there may be ongoing projects that had to be updated, turnover of 8th grade folders to go to the high school, or incoming kindergartners enter into Power School, things like that.
So this goes from 10 to 13 this summer. Is this a one-time need because of this book thing, or does this say, we could really use them 13 days before going off?
It's, I can't quite answer that. In theory, it's one time this year, but if it works well for the other bits and pieces, I may come back to you and say, hey, we want to do it again. It worked well. But in theory, we want to try it.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah.
Laura.
So really more of a comment than a question. This seems like a good opportunity with adding new books in to have some that are diverse, to add some diversity in, if it doesn't already exist, and showing different types of kids especially. I just wanted to make that comment. And that's an interest of mine, so I'm happy to share resources for that, but
Great,
just a
thank you.
suggestion.
Yeah. Okay, so for classroom numbers, you'll see there that we have wrestled with how to approach our class divisions this for next year. The numbers you see, we've always struggled between 2 and 3 sections. So sometimes we've had 2 sections. So for example, our current 8th grade is like 45 students. That group has always been in 2 sections until this year. So they were like a 22 or a 23. Other times we've had the same number of students, but the makeup of the group really requires 3 sections rather than 2 sections. When it's generally a 20, it's or 40 kids in a grade level, it's a pretty straightforward 2 classes. And then when it's generally a 50, it's a pretty straightforward 3 classes. We get caught in the middle, as you can see by our numbers. So the conundrum we have coming up for next year is that the structure of our 7th and 8th grade, and by the way, this was written, I had a question about how this was portrayed. Where it says 7 and 8, 80 children, 5 teachers, 16, the class size would be either 2 sections of 20-ish and 2 sections of 13, 14-ish, because we have 5 classes. The reason it was written this way is we don't know at this point whether the 7 or the 8 would be the 3 or the 2. But either way, that's how it would break down. And we recognize that that number is lower than we would choose to have, and it's lower than we would, financially generally want to support. But the issue is that our 7th or 8th grade structure is this. The teachers and the students are together for 2 years. So, for example, our science teacher teaches this year, currently, 2 sections of 7th grade science and 3 sections of 8th grade science. So those are the 5 classes that she teaches. Likewise, our Spanish teacher, our language arts teacher, our math teacher, and our social studies teacher. So the Spanish at our school is one of the core classes in 7th and 8th grade. So it's not a special or a related art. So if we were to reduce this number, so the group coming in currently from 6th grade, it was 2 sections of 6th grade. And when this cohort that will be in 7th and 8th grade were in 5th and 6th grade together, that was 2 classes and 2 classes. So that's how they have moved through together. When we move up to 7th and 8th grade, because of the fact that the teachers work with 2 grade levels across 5 subjects, if we were to try and move this to, say, 2 sections, like a 7th grade team and an 8th grade team, we run into a problem on several fronts. One is we'd have a certification issue. So as much as we try to hire K-8 teachers, because then they have flexibility around where they teach, we have some teachers in our 7th and 8th grade team who, for example, language arts is a 7 through 12 endorsement. In Maine, it's K through 8 or 7 through 12. Unfortunately, the state, despite requests for many years, have not shifted that to a 6 through 12 endorsement. So it makes it very difficult for middle schools who have a 6 through 8 structure to have that flexibility. So, when you have a 7 through 12 language arts teacher and that is their specialty, they can't then also teach math, or they can't then go down and teach at the 5th or 6th grade level. The certification sort of binds them in. So we have some certification issues within that team that would limit some of that. Also, if we were to maintain 5 sections, so they would still have Spanish, it would mean that one teacher would have to be teaching 3 subjects, one of which would be Spanish in both grade levels. We only have one person who can teach and speak Spanish, so either that or one group's going without Spanish, which again would be a deficit when they then move on to the high school. And we had looked at a variety of different things to try and solve this because, again, we recognize that it's not preferred. The other issue is that, as you know, we moved to Big Ideas Math program last year, and we've invested a lot in professional development over the last year and a half. Nate Garnett, a math coach for 6 through 12, does a great job, but he works with the math teachers basically on a monthly level for PD of approaching units to ensure that they're hitting the targets we need to hit with the math. To bring in somebody to now teach a year of math who has not taught it ever from our team would be really compromising to the students. A couple of years ago, we had, due to a health issue for the math teacher at the time, we had to have someone in as a one-year position who hadn't taught math. They were a skilled math person. They were a teacher, but they were a general teacher. That cohort's MEA scores went from 64% of them meeting or exceeding in 7th grade to 50% meeting or exceeding in 8th grade. So it's a pretty dramatic impact. And that's just at that level. The scaled scores were even clustered closer to those cut points. So between limited content knowledge, and I say that to science also, you know, we have an outstanding science teacher who has, you know, amazing results. The school is generally at or near the top of all the schools in the state when it comes to 8th grade MEA science. If somebody else was teaching one grade level of that, and not that other grade level, it would really we think it would really impact student learning. So for that variety of reasons, we end up looking behind, and we will be having 3 classes in 6th grade. There's 3 classes in 5th grade next year. We know that this is coming back. So for 1 year to try and put a different measure in that would compromise sort of content knowledge and specialty sort of knowledge for these teachers, plus the challenges of certification, that was why we had then requested to have this sort of funding. The reason what the funding is to put a teacher in the 6th grade. So usually within our school, we're able to shift. So for example, this current year we have 2 1st grade classes. We know that next year we will need 3 1st grade classes. There's 50 children in kindergarten. Our 3rd grade is currently 3 teachers, and we know that next year they will need to have 2 teachers because we know we've got 40 children in 2nd grade. A position from 3rd grade will fill that 1st grade position, and that's usually how it works. We're able to shift where the bubble was to where the bubble is. When it hits 7th and 8th grade with a lull, and this is the first time we've had this in like 15 years, so that's where we've had to sort of wrestle with it. And so that's why we're requesting, rather than be able to shift someone from 7, 8 into 6th grade, we're requesting funding to put a person into the 6th grade for next year. I'm not sure that makes sense because it sounds complicated even as I say it.
Did you bring a flow chart?
I tried to explain it to the administrative team and they just were like, what? And then everybody sort of took turns in trying to say, I think what he said was, so.
So as a parent who had 3 children go through Durham Community School, it makes perfect sense to me because I've been through it. And I think that the 7th and 8th grade, the one thing you said about having, you know, a science teacher who does both the 7th and the 8th grade and a language arts teacher who does both, the continuity there is just something that is not worth messing around with. And I also had a child who was in the math issue that you discussed. So, you know, to have it so that doesn't happen again, I think this is, you know, an easy thing to vote for. Or I don't think we have to vote on it.
Eventually, we'll have to vote on it. But I mean, I think for me, it's the short-term nature. Like, if this was going to be a more systemic thing for years, then it's okay. We need to come up with something that's sustainable. But
right, and potentially that, you know, if you look back at where grades 2 and 3 will be next year, our current 1st and 2nd grade, that may be a multi-year issue. And so over the next 5 years, you know, this is clearly something we have to prepare for. Because if it was more than 1 year, you know, then we have to figure out, okay, what do we need to look at and how can we position ourselves to prepare for that section? So we shall try. I'm not quite sure where that will be at this point, but, you know, as we say, certification, flexibility, different content, et cetera, et cetera.
Thank you. That was a great explanation. Now, I do have a follow-up question.
Sure.
Is there anyone making any attempts to reach the DOE to try to resolve the certification issue? Because in the absence of that 7 through 12, K through 8, you would be fine switching 1 teacher down to 6. Because the continuity would still...
So say that again, sorry. I heard a bit about no
Yeah,
one
correct
asked.
me if I'm wrong, but what I understood from your explanation was that if the certification were not the issue, then you would have been able to move one of the 7-8
No,
teachers down to 6.
No. So that is one of the factors that would limit. So if we were willing to compromise content specialty and having somebody teach subject matter that they don't even know, then at that point we still would have needed to then have some flexibility. We do have within our team a couple of teachers who have a K-8 certification who could be moved, but in doing that we would move away like the math teacher, and we would be left with 4 people who have never taught math, or we would move away, that alone would not solve the problem. It would allow us to move someone. We have that capacity to move someone, but the person we would be moving would be the person we've just trained in math, and we're left with nobody to teach math then to 2 grade levels. So that's part of the challenge. In terms of if people have contacted DOE, not personally, but I can tell you that for having worked in middle school for 10 years before then working here for 15 years, this has been an issue for at least 25 years. It never has shifted from the junior high model, where junior high would be 7 through 9 and high school would up. Despite the predominant shift to middle schools back, in the like 1990s, it's still, I don't know why the DOE doesn't do anything about it.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Because people call them about all sorts of other things.
So I had a question about pre-K wait lists. I don't think it was necessarily to do with this, but I wasn't sure who the question was. And do you want me to answer it now? Or?
Sure.
Okay.
It's more.
Okay. Sorry.
Yeah, I just was curious. I saw that we had for a couple of the other schools the possibility of additional pre-K, but as Becky said, I think that priority got bumped to next year, and I was just wondering if in Durham that there's a wait list, and if there are families who want to get in and who aren't getting in.
So I can. So our current school year, so we're capped at 32 for our program. It's the 16 per class is the maximum. So we have the ability to run 2 sessions, and so we're capped at 32. Last year we had 40 people initially sign up, and so 4 of those families then, 4 families who were in then decided they actually wanted something different from 2 days. It wasn't going to work for them. They needed like a 5-day program somewhere. So 4 of those 8 got into the program, and 4 were then still on the wait list, of which 3 families then pursued something different. So once they find out that they're not able to join, at that point most of the families have pursued other alternatives. We do still have a family on the wait list. Then for this year we only opened registration on Friday, so we've just started to register. I know some of the other schools are a little further along with that process. So we're at 16, I think, as of today. So I would anticipate that we will fill it again at that point.
Is it first come, first serve?
Not quite. So what we do is it's opened up to everybody, but we do have a date in March. I don't have the exact date in my mind, but I can look it up if you want it. But what we do for each of the schools is we have a date by which we say, okay, this is sort of the priority registration date. Let's say we had 40 people register by, I'm going to just say April 1st. It is actually a bit earlier than that, but for the sake of the discussion. If we had 40 families by April 1st, we do screening for pre-K, and a priority is given to those children who would have a specific need from an academic or social emotional need that would really benefit from pre-K. So let's just say we had 5 students in that category. That would then leave us with 35 children who are going to be looking for 27 slots, and then it's a lottery. And then those additional 5 would have been then on the wait list, and anybody who comes in after that date would be wait list. If, as of our hypothetical date of April 1st, we had 31 families, regardless of screening, because everybody's accessible, they're in. So if a family with a high need child or a child who needed extra support came after we've set the 32, somebody doesn't get bumped. They would then be on a wait list. And what we have done the last few years is we look across the 3 schools. So, if, we've had in the past children get offered a slot at the Moore Street program or the Pownell program or vice versa. So in the summer, that sort of occurs as we try to support as many families as we can, but it is oversubscribed. That make sense? Okay, thank you.
Before you go, Will.
Sorry,
Oh,
I have
sorry.
another question.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Could you please explain the 4th grade situation with the class sizes?
Yes. Sorry, I beg your pardon. I was going to bring that up. So that was a place where we specifically looked at, those were the 2 options for us, was, with this 6th grade need, where could we knew that we were going to move from a 3rd grade to a 1st grade, and then it was like, what do we move to the 6th grade? So 4th grade is the one that is closest. As I mentioned at the beginning, we've had classes of 22, 23 in the past, but it is very much contingent on the cohort. And this particular cohort, we had looked at this last year when they were going from 2nd grade to 3rd grade to decide whether we would leave them as 3, which they had been since kindergarten, or whether they could move to a 2. This is just a cohort that still needs to remain as a 3. The specific makeup of the group has a variety of needs that need supporting, and it wouldn't be effective in classes that sort of closer to the upper limit. So again, we recognize that we certainly explored that and had specifically looked at what would 2 sections look like, and it really wouldn't be beneficial. Okay. I just walked away. I was supposed to say, does anybody else have another question?
Clearly, he doesn't want any more questions.
No.
But Kate, feel free.
Can you just repeat for me again what happens in 7-8 if you don't, if you're not able to keep your one teacher there? If you had to move the teacher, what would the class sizes do?
If it's not so much so are you asking if we went to 4 teachers instead of 5?
Yeah.
If we went to 4 teachers instead of 5, the class sizes would be 20 per class, which is perfectly appropriate, but they would be getting taught by people who aren't really qualified to teach it.
And do you lose one?
Well, the teacher would go to 6th grade.
No, I mean,
Oh.
I thought one of the risks was one of the wouldn't be able to have Spanish.
Again, the teachers wouldn't be qualified, so you would either lose Spanish or you're going to try and have some sort of Spanish taught through a computer or by someone who's not certified to teach Spanish, which they don't have to teach. It gets complicated without getting into contracts. So we would end up with 2 groups of 20, or 4 classes of 20, which is very appropriate, but it would be the content is what would become the impact.
And they're getting ELA, math, science,
Social studies.
social studies,
And
and
Spanish.
Spanish. Okay, thank you.
And I mean, if we moved Spanish out of it, then the Spanish was being taught somewhere else by the Spanish teacher, it doesn't reduce a staff member. So it creates, we can have 2 sections of 7th grade and 8th grade, but then the Spanish teacher is still teaching Spanish. So if we were to eliminate Spanish, then you could do those other 4 subjects. But then it would be problematic because we're having kids come in to the high school in a comparable sort of setting to FMS is what we're trying to achieve.
So they all do Spanish and nobody does French in 7-8?
We don't have French. We
You
just
don't have French. So that's
Because
why
of-
you have Spanish as a core subject.
Right. Because of
Okay.
numbers-wise, we'd have to have sort of a quarter-time position of each if you were going to do a little bit of everything, or a half-time position of each to try and do it. And it's not easy to get language teachers full stop. And we had initially, when we first started foreign language, it was a special K through 8, and they had like a little bit each week. But for the students, when they were going on to 9th grade to come in at a sort of comparable level, we shifted that to being a 2-year program in 7th and 8th grade. So they get it once a day. And so so there's no French, I guess is what I say.
They get to speak much better in one language, but they have no choice.
But they have no choice.
I'm sorry, I heard the no choice bit, but I didn't
They
hear the
get
first
to
bit.
be much better, much more fluent in Spanish, but they have no choice.
That's right.
Yeah. And
I
the
could
reason
tell,
why
I
I
could
was
start with
asking,
English
yeah, right.
and go with we'll start with empathetic.
Yeah.
Yes.
Thank you.
I can tell you my son speaks more Spanish in the first semester and a month than my husband did a year in Central America. So, but Jay's just apparently not very linguistically capable. But I think it's because Mrs. Bisbee does a great job with the Spanish.
Yeah, she does.
So I had a clarification question. Maybe it's for Becky. On this sheet, did it change? I noticed we have the nursing for Freeport Middle School. Is it across the 3 school? I wasn't sure if you had increased nursing services for Durham or not.
Durham already
No.
has a
Okay, so-
full-time
Yeah, we have
nurse,
full-time.
K-8, yeah.
So
So,
that's the question.
yes, the nursing is a equity issue more than anything.
Okay.
All of the other schools that are of comparable size have full-time nursing.
Okay, then I don't have a question.
All right. This time I should say, any other questions? Sorry.
Don't leave the building, but you can sit down.
Yeah, all right, yeah, thank you. Yeah. That's right, again, next time.
Okay, Ray, Freeport Middle School.
Okay. So just to start with, the kind of last year's addition for us was adding an RTI-B ed tech, which the teachers and the students that are involved with that would report that it's highly successful, but that is really all anecdotal at this point in time, not really with data that's been collected around that. Just to give you an idea of what that kind of looks like, prior to this year, we had one regular ed tech who serviced kids in all 3 grades. So it was really just touching the absolutely most needy and probably not knowing enough of what's going on in their classrooms to make a big enough dent. So what we did is moved the new ed tech to 6th grade, put the other ed tech in 7th grade, and had those two really dive in with those students in particular and those teachers. And then the 8th grade, those two will see additional 8th grade students as needed. With that, both of those 6th grade and 7th grade ed techs will push into some of the classrooms to provide direct support around executive functioning skills, around behavior support, around anything. And the teachers have kind of created that schedule for the ed tech to provide the support for kids. The ed tech also provides pull-out direct instruction for kids that need additional support around, planning, around, homework completion, around, monitoring behavior plans that have been put in place. And then both of them will access 8th graders as needed and spend some time with them. So the initial reports we're very happy with it, and it's been a very nice addition. And then to move on to the request for this year, probably about 6 years ago, Moore Street came and asked for increased nursing services. Then about 3 or 4 years ago, Mass Landing and Pownell came and asked for increasing nursing services. And at that point in time, I was asked the question, do you need more nursing services? You are well below everyone else. And I said, with the current kids that we have, we feel very happy and, like we're well supportive of what we have. I'll come back later if that changes. Now those kids that were in Moore Street when they asked, were in Mass Landing and Pownell when they asked, they are now with us. And I see exactly why they were asking for it, and I don't see anyone younger than us giving anything back. So we see it as a long-term need, not just a short-term solution to going through with that. So we are looking to add 0.3 to put us at a full-time nurse at the middle school. We had been 0.5 for prior to being an RSU, early on in the RSU, we went from 0.5 to 0.7 with that. And then we've been at 0.7 for probably the last 7 years or so with that. The one question I wrote in here, it's really to help with, the health of students, both physical and they help support on the mental health side. And I think one of the questions I got is, would we better serve having additional social work instead of additional nursing? And what happens is the kids will come down to the nurse's office with physical ailments. I don't feel good. I have a stomachache. I have a headache. And the nurse is really the kind of that first level of triage and trying to figure out what's really going on. And, the well over 75% of the kids that she sees, she gets back to class, and that's really, the important thing. She has, for some, if she sees them multiple times, she'll then, figure out, there's other things going on, talk to them, talk to our guidance counselors, talk to our social work, talk to their parents. So then she can help, get them connected with Ms. Latham, the guidance counselor, get them connected with one of the social workers at school, talk to the parents that you might need to be doing something outside. So she's not necessarily giving the mental health support, but she is on the plans that maybe the social worker has created or the guidance counselor has created. She is the feet on the ground implementing that plan, and talking to them about, all right, this is the plan, this is what we need to do, these are the steps we need to do, and then let me walk you back up to class. So she may be the one implementing the plan that has been created. An example today is, we had 2 students, the nurse was not in. They texted their parents and said, come get me. And I talked to both of the parents and said, if they do that, tell them to go down to the nurse. And the kids were like, well, I knew the nurse wasn't here. I'm like, we'll still talk to you. We'll try our best. But when the nurse isn't there, that's what kids do. If I'm not available, Mr. Carter's not available, Ms. Latham's not available, they are just going to call home. And then we've lost seat time for the rest of the day, and they can't do any learning. And they're, the kids that we could have got back to class. So that is what we're looking at for that. And then the other question I had was sent to me about SAT. When the SAT stipends came here and was debated at the school board a few years ago, at that point in time, we decided to change our SAT format because it was originally outside of the day. And so we moved it inside of the day as opposed to having one SAT team for the entire school like we used to have with representatives from every team. We then made it part of the team time that we meet with the grade level teams and Unified Arts team to really take kids through that SAT process with that. So we've embedded it in the day, but I will say that that is something that someone did recently bring up is, can we relook at how to best do this? And we're always relooking to do things best. The one thing they did say is, I don't want to go back to what we had before, but let's always look to improve. So that's always a discussion on looking to improve with that. And I said, we'll talk about it at the next leadership team and see what people think, how it's going, or what we can do to improve that. But it is embedded in the day with all teachers involved right now.
So just because not all the questions went out to everybody, do you have what the question was?
I have it on my computer. Becky.
I think the question was just asking whether you had considered stipending the SAT team, like the high school.
Or what we were doing
around
that. What we were doing around that now that we don't have that stipend.
Right, exactly.
So we moved it within the day.
Okay.
For the teachers.
Student action team?
Student action team. So it's really the action team that will come together when you have a kid that's struggling in any avenue, and they really kind of put in different responses and different interventions for the kid to help talk through. And it's just good to have more voices at the table to hear different perspectives and people that know them in different ways. And you really want to exhaust those resources before you would even start a special education referral on a child. So we've moved it into the school day.
Thank you. I just know we have some new folks on the
Yep.
board
Yes.
that
Thank
SAT
you. I
may mean
appreciate
something different to them.
Yes, it does. Any other questions?
Valerie.
So Ray, as the bubble moves up to 8th grade, how are you dealing with the teachers and the certification and moving them from 7th to 8th? Because clearly you're moving teachers, well, basically teachers looped from 6th to 7th and they relearned 7th grade to teach the students. So that was probably a challenge. And now there are 2 teachers who are not teaching 8th grade now who will be next year. How do you handle situations like that?
So anyone that can teach 7th grade can teach 8th grade. It's the 6th grade in our school that's tricky. Whenever we can, we do, that K through 8 certification just makes your life so much easier, but that's not always the best candidate who's there, and we always want the best candidate regardless of their certification. With that, we're still working in the process of doing that, but there will be 2 certified teachers, 7 through 12, in their subject area to go there. And what it is in Maine is 7 through 12 is subject area specific, K through 8 is general. So if you're K through 8, you can teach anything certified. If you're 7 through 12, you can only teach that particular subject.
So next year you will have 2 teachers that you won't need for 6th grade because your bubble is going to the high school and you don't have a new bubble coming up. So what's the plan for that?
I was, probably just going to keep them, right?
I was going to suggest you give them to Will next year. Problem solved.
In the past, we've had that as different bubbles have come through Moore Street to Mass Landing to us, and when we're in that situation, we do have that conversation as an administrative team and looking at, all right, do we need, do we put, who makes the most sense that would become a 5th grade teacher or a 9th grade teacher if Jen has a need to, for the bubble. So that would be a conversation that would take place with all the administrators present about, what's the best for the district to move forward. And a lot of times, more so than not, the issues take care of themselves. Meaning there's retirements, there's people that move in different directions, that there isn't that need to do that. I think only once have we actually had to have that conversation. Every other time, the need takes care of itself.
Well, as long as all of you are talking together, so if there's a lack of teachers in one school and there's a surplus in another, there's some communication there, so we're not overstaffing one school, and then that's good to know. I had one more question.
Anyone else?
Thank you. So with the students who go to the nurse and then might get referred to the guidance counselor, have you seen an increase in the teachers, in the students who actually get to the guidance counselor?
I think we're definitely seeing an increase of kids who are coming down. I think that there's, an increase of kids that we are needing to have, either guidance plans for, set up with them, or kids that are, getting social work that, we currently have 3 social workers at the school. 1 is a full-time, RSU 5 employee. 2 other contracted people that will bill people's insurance or main care with that. So we have, some coverage for kids too to create, social work opportunities for children.
Okay, thanks.
Anything
other
else
questions?
for Ray before we release him? Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much.
It's the downside to being first. We're all full of questions. Us or you?
Hi, everyone.
Hi, Jen.
So for the high school budget, I thought I'd just start with the request that we put forth last year. The first one that actually isn't listed on the sheet was a large sum that went towards our NEASC visit this year, which I think was a successful visit. We were very proud of the work that we presented forward to NEASC, and I presented to the board last year that some schools are considering how to move forward with NEASC because it is such a substantial cost. So that's not something we're investigating at this time because we have 10 more years until they come back. But I've also learned that the NIASC organization is making some changes to the way that they are doing things because so many schools are struggling with it not being a cost-effective process. The second request that we had was for the .5 math strategist, math coach, which has been a wonderful addition. Nate Garnett, who was already known in the district and had worked with Durham and Freeport Middle School, is now here. And he has been working with individual teachers doing coaching cycles in their classroom, meaning they'll do a pre-meeting, decide on what the focus is for their work, for where he's going to coach them. And then he's going in multiple classes, either to observe and give them feedback, or also modeling a lesson with them using our new Big Ideas program. So that has been wonderful. He's also helping to lead alongside our math department chair for math department meetings, and has helped with planning and facilitating PLD days for all of the math teachers, including the meeting that we had for all 6 through 12 teachers a few weeks ago. And Nate led the math department for that, for all of the middle school and high school teachers. So he's been a wonderful addition. I think he's been well received by our teachers, and they're seeing him as a support that they can reach out to in their classes. The other request that we had was stipend for our department chairs. It was perfectly timed because we added the 18 hours this year of professional time to our after-school meetings, and really just about all of that 18 hours has been dedicated to department work, because the structure of time at the high school is such that there isn't a time ever during the day when all English teachers could meet or all math teachers could meet. The only time to do that is outside of school hours. So we have been really fortunate and are thankful for the support that we've had to add those additional times. And so the work of the department chair has significantly increased, in that they are helping to plan and lead those meetings. And we are looking into more facilitator training for our department chairs, which our leadership team members have already gone through. Some of our department chairs serve in both roles, but I would say our department chairs are doing an outstanding job this year, and I think the stipend has been helpful to have that separate from the leadership stipends. So then moving on to this year, there's a few things that we've put on here. The first one is a .25 science position. We currently have a .75 science teacher, so that would increase her to a full-time position. With the increase of our numbers, particularly at the 9th grade level, we've had an increase in the number of sections that we offer for 9th grade science, which has then had a ripple effect on what people are teaching. One of our science teachers also serves as a support in the math lab, and she has not been able to do that this year because of an increase in the number of sections. So it would allow us to offer more sections of science in class and also put that support back into the math lab. So it's benefiting multiple departments there. In terms of the .5 world language position, one thing that has been crystal clear from colleges for many years, but even more so, is that they are looking for 3 to 4 years for a student to take the same world language when applying to a 4-year school. I'm also totally biased because I was a Spanish teacher, so I want people to take 4 years of a language. This year, in past years, we have combined a Spanish 4 and 5 class, and so the teacher has differentiated that class amongst the kids there. The good thing that happened this year was the numbers were too large to do that. And so we currently have 15 kids that are in Spanish 4, and this year we were not able to offer Spanish 5. And so 13 of those 15 kids are juniors, and so they would be able to take Spanish 5 next year if we were able to expand this position. They come in because of the work that the middle school does at Spanish 2, and then they go 2, 3, 4, 5. And so we had those students on an online program this year that did not work. Sadly, 10 of 10 dropped the online class. It's incredibly hard to take a world language online. The College Board has currently dropped AP Online Spanish, and so we feel pretty strongly like the addition of this position would allow us to then offer a full range of classes. And then the final thing is expanding the Endeavor program. The Endeavor program is currently our alternative program, alternative pathway that is dedicated for juniors. What we have seen with this program, it's evolved over the last 4 years, and what we have seen is an increase in academic success for those students, a decrease in discipline incidents. What we've struggled with is the students who are in the program who were juniors last year and showed a great deal of growth are currently significantly struggling as seniors because they went back into mainstream classes. They have some support in that they're in an advisory with their Endeavor program teachers from last year. But we feel that if we were able to expand this program, looking at potentially what the support could be for 10th graders. Our current program is, like I said, dedicated to 11th graders, and then we would be able to expand that to 12th graders. It's also, I think, in seeing multiple alternative programs in different high schools, one thing that I think is working well is that this is a half-time program, and so it's not that students are kind of secluded in the building or not involved with other students. It's very different than that, than they are either. Some of them are participating in Region 10 in the morning and then come back here and Endeavors in the afternoon, or they're taking mainstream classes, and then they have this real targeted support from the Endeavor staff. So if we were able to add a 1.0 position, then we would be able to expand that program. And we're looking at what is the highest need, 10th grade or 12th grade, or a combination of both. So those are our major requests this year. Oh, and I'm sorry, down at the bottom, we are piloting the Earth System Science texts this year. We went through the pilot where our process is to look at multiple texts, select one that we feel like is the strongest, pilot it for a full school year where we're using it with students, and we feel like this has been a good resource, both the online and print text for those students in that class, and we would like to move forward with purchasing the textbook. Everything this year has been free, which has been wonderful. So we would like to move forward with that. Oh, I have some questions too, sorry.
I was going to say, we did get a question from Maddie, knowing she wouldn't be here, specific about that adoption of the Earth Systems text. And you may have the question, or I'm not sure, but basically it says, I know this was the first year in the grade 9 offering, wondering how it was going, what challenges have been, and does the request address the challenge?
So I think anytime you implement a new curriculum, there's challenges that come along with that. Some of these units that are in this class, the science teachers in 9th grade have taught before. Some they've never taught before. And so innately there's challenges in them presenting material that has not been taught to 9th grade students, finding out what their background knowledge is, what misconceptions they have. I think one thing that actually Will Pidden, when he was here for a visit, made a comment of seeing that in one of the classes it seems like a good progression of rigor, that it's something that they had, a topic that they were working on in terms of space. Right now they're doing plates in the earth, tectonic plates, and so talking about how it seems like a natural progression. It's something that was introduced in 6th and 7th grade, potentially 8th grade, and now they're exploring that at a higher level. And so I think the challenges are planning a brand new curriculum, finding the time to collaborate to do that. This year we have 3 teachers teaching this class. And so we're trying to do things like this coming Friday, those teachers have release time that they're planning together. They've been working with our Great Schools Partnership coach last year to do some targeted planning for this curriculum. The textbook, how does that address it? I think it's just a resource we find it's a really strong resource. It's aligned to the next gen science standards. So a lot of the work that we do of pulling out learning targets and coming up with scoring criteria, it's all in that resource. One challenge was we weren't able to get the access to the online materials until about the end of the first quarter. We had a webinar, we were struggling with it. And now kids are able to get on there and they will be able to access that. So I was sharing with a parent tonight, the benefit of that. They do have print textbooks, classroom copies, but where there might be a diagram in a textbook, that online is an interactive demonstration of something where it might show how the plates of the earth shift and color code them, which is, kind of makes it come alive, which is different than the textbook. But so I think, we'll continue to work to support the teachers in planning this curriculum, and I think the resource would help.
Is there a brief way to describe what the deficiencies of the previous curriculum textbook were leading to the exploration of a new textbook?
So one of the things that we have seen with the adoption of the Next Gen Science standards is the way that our science classes were laid out. Some students could potentially skip an entire strand of some of the sections or some of the performance indicators or standards. For example, like we never touched space. Kids haven't explored space in the high school in a long time. I don't know how long. And so that goes under physical sciences. And so science and sustainability was our previous class. It was very heavily life science based. And I think this has a broader spectrum of tapping into life sciences, but also tapping into physical sciences, some of the engineering and design concepts. So I think it's a stronger pathway to build their 4-year science, because our goal is for all students to experience all standards of the Next Gen Science standards by the time that they graduate.
So with the Spanish, you said, correct me if I'm wrong, that they don't have AP Spanish online anymore, so that's not an option, or was it just Spanish 5?
No, so they don't have AP Spanish anymore, but what we had was virtual high school Spanish, and that was the class that unfortunately our 10 students dropped that. So AP Spanish wasn't offered at all this year.
Okay. So my comment to that is I do know that with the work that they do at the middle school, I can only speak for Durham, but I'm sure Freeport does it as well. One of the things that's so important to those kids is the goal of getting to Spanish 5.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that it's really important I think that's a really important thing to keep going. I just think it's very easy, if a kid goes to high school, Spanish 1 through 4, but making it to Spanish 5 just kind of is a definite big next step, especially if we don't have an AP course that corresponds with it. So that's just a comment. My other comment is being on the dropout committee, the explanation that's been given at that committee meeting of Endeavor, I just can't say enough about what it sounds like, what it's doing for kids, for the whole multiple pathways. So I think that's also very important.
Thank you. I think I had another question. No, it was elaborate on the Endeavor program. So students there tend to be our disengaged, undercredited, struggling with traditional high school, in need of strong adult connections. All of these are kind of elements that are criteria that we look for who would be a good fit. This is the first year that I've had 2 students in the cafeteria say, I want to sign up for Endeavor. I was like, okay, which we have not had in the past. And so I'll say, the cohorts of kids change with their needs, and we need to adapt to what their needs are. Some have much more deficiencies in credits that they've just failed many, many classes, and we need to figure out a better way for them to get on a track to diploma, whereas others have significant behavioral issues that we need to address. So we really have tried. The teachers are doing phenomenal work that are in there. It's all interdisciplinary units. So the 3 teachers that are in there are social studies, a science, and an ELA teacher. And so they'll do a unit where they're reading a text that might be tied to something that is in the field of forensics, and then they're exploring the forensics that go along with that. So it's also trying to do high engagement. They're going on Friday to the Holocaust Museum and trying to connect these experiences outside of school to what they're doing in school.
So there's currently 3 teachers that are
all part-time, so they only teach There's only 2 in the room at a time, and so all 3 of them have mainstream classes in addition to the Endeavor program.
Okay, because I was trying to figure out the math of 3 of them doing the 11th grade and 1 more does the whole 12th grade.
Yeah, it's a Jenga puzzle right now.
Yeah,
So sometimes there's 1 in the room, sometimes there's 2 in the room, there's never 3 in the room at the same time. So the 3 of them collaborate, and all their practices and their policies and their curriculum, but they're not all 3 teaching at the same time.
And how many kids are in the program?
Right. Our goal was about like 12 to 15, trying to keep the numbers small, and so we're right around 12 right now. There's a couple of students who are struggling with attendance.
And so then the new 1.0, could that be made up by several people picking up additional portions of a time similar to these 3?
Yes.
So it wouldn't be one person who spent 100% of their time, it would be...
Right. It could potentially be that one of them spends their full time, but I think what we've tried to do is really kind of manipulate their schedules so that they could be in both worlds. But it might be when we explore, if this was approved and we explore how we do it logistically,